Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this workshop. My name is Sherry Tomaski, and I am the Director of Public Affairs and Communications at Hunger Solutions New York, and we welcome you to a conversation on federal food programs with representatives of USDA. I am pleased to introduce our speakers today. First, I would like to introduce let me just make sure I have everyone's bio here. I would like to introduce Mary Jo McLarney. She is the team lead for school nutrition programs at USDA in the Northeast Regional Office in Boston, Massachusetts. She is a registered dietitian with a bachelor's degree in exercise science and a master's in nutrition science from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And she's also completed a dietetic internship at Massachusetts General Hospital. Prior to joining USDA in 2010, Mary Jo served as regional nutritionist for Chartwells and nutrition director in Massachusetts for 13 years with the Westboro and Somerville public school districts in Massachusetts. Somerville schools were one of the 20 school districts in the U.S. to receive the 2006 Congressional Victory Against Hunger Award. In 2008 and 2009, 4 Somerville elementary schools were awarded gold, silver, and bronze awards from USDA for the Healthier U.S. School Challenge, recognizing excellence in nutrition and physical activity, thanks to many of Mary Jo's contributions. Mary Jo currently works with USDA's Northeast team on the National School Lunch Program mission to safeguard the health and well-being of the nation's children. She has received the USDA Secretary of Agriculture's Honor Award for excellence in training and technical assistance for her work with the USDA team in 2011, and she received the USDA Abraham Lincoln Award in 2015 for her work on the USDA National Community Eligibility Provision Expansion Team. She's a lifelong proponent of wellness promotion and creating healthier environments for people most in need. And when Mary Jo speaks, I'm sure you will benefit from much of that expertise and knowledge in her work. I'm also pleased to introduce Ashley Krebs. She joined federal service in 2015, working within the SNAP operations branch. Prior to joining the Northeast Regional Office of USDA, Ashley was the Director of Child Nutrition Outreach for Project Bread. Through her leadership and partnership building, her work resulted in increased program awareness, expanded access, and enhanced meal quality for many of the food and nutrition service programs. Ashley is a registered dietitian and holds a bachelor's degree in nutrition and a master's degree in education with a concentration in nutrition from Framingham State University. Next, I'm pleased to introduce to you Patty Connolly. She is the lead program specialist for USDA food programs in the Food and Nutrition Service Northeast Regional Office for USDA. She spent 11 years working with SNAP before joining the Food Distribution Program, where she worked for the last 22 years, overseeing TFAP, Commodity Supplemental Food Programs, FDPIR, and the USDA Foods for Schools. We also welcome Matt Chatkowski. Matt is the team lead with USDA's Food and Nutrition Service Office, and he has worked in the field of child nutrition for the past 30 years. His major interests are in farm to school and in food waste, and Matt was once a Peace Corps volunteer, and he continually seeks adventure travel. And last but not least, I'm very pleased to introduce Cybele Van Antwerp. She recently joined the Office of Community Food Systems at USDA as the Northeast Farm to School Regional Lead. She spent the last year working with the SNAP program, also in USDA, and prior to this was working in Lima, Peru with the National Trade Association. Cybele also worked in Northern Colombia for 2 years with the Peace Corps, where she focused on the cacao supply chain. Cybele is passionate about food and nutrition security, as well as local food systems, and she studied agricultural economics at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. Welcome, everyone from the USDA Regional Office. We're so pleased to have you here in New York State at the New York State Food Summit. We are going to be enjoying an overview of the programs that each of you work on and learning more about how USDA Regional Office can support all of us who are operating programs and supporting the anti-hunger work here in New York State. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Mary Jo to get us started.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation and our session about the federal food assistance programs. My name is Mary Jo McClarney, and I work as a team lead for the United States Department of Agriculture with the Food Nutrition Service, and my primary area of responsibility is the school nutrition programs. Before we start today's session, what I'd like to do is provide a brief overview of the agenda. I'd like to start with an introduction to the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, which includes an overview of our mission and the impact, particularly this year, that COVID-19 has had on all of our work. Following this, I'd like to introduce the other members of today's panel, who will then each speak about their work in the USDA programs. Finally, at the end of the session, we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes for questions and answer session. We kindly ask that you hold any questions until the end of the presentation, and if you do have questions, could you please submit them via the chat box. The Food and Nutrition Service, or FNS as we refer to it, is an agency of the USDA that works to provide nutritious meals and end hunger and obesity through the administration of 15 different federal nutrition assistance programs. Some of the FNS programs you may be familiar with include the WIC program, which is the Women, Infants, and Children's program, SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and the School Meals Program, which includes the National School Lunch, School Breakfast, Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, and the Special Milk Program. The mission of FNS is to increase food security and reduce hunger by providing children, and particularly low-income people, access to food, a healthful diet, and nutrition education in a way that both supports American agriculture and inspires public confidence. In fiscal year 2020 alone, the Food Nutrition Service spent a total of $122.1 billion on food assistance. In a typical year, FNS programs serve approximately 1 in 4 Americans through this funding in partnership with state and tribal governments. The FNS programs are administered by USDA on the federal level in 7 regional offices throughout the United States. Our Northeast Regional Office is located in Boston, Massachusetts, and our region includes the 6 New England states, New York, and the beautiful Virgin Islands. The USDA works in partnership with 4 key state agencies in New York to provide funding and administer the FNS programs. We would never be successful without all of their support, cooperation, and hard work. FNS works with the New York State Education Department in both the National School Lunch Program, or what we call the NSLP, and the Summer Food Service Program, or the SFSP. The Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP, as well as the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC, and the CSFP, these are tongue twisters, which is the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, are all administered in partnership with the New York State Department of Health. The USDA Foods Program, as well as the Emergency Food Assistance Program, which we refer to as TFAP, are administered with the New York State Office of General Services. And finally, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, which is USDA's largest program, is administered with the New York Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. Today's panelists work on these programs in concert with New York State agencies and will provide additional information and context during today's presentation. I'd just like to talk a little bit about our work during the COVID-19 pandemic, as it impacted our work so significantly. We have seen an increased food insecurity in the United States due to unemployment, food and supply chain disruptions, and business, school, and child nutrition program sponsor closures. The percentage of individuals reporting that they do not have enough to eat has more than tripled, rising from 3.7% of adults in 2019 to an average of just over 11.5% of adults in 2021, according to the USDA Economic Research Service. The FNS programs serve a critical role to combat food insecurity. USDA responded to unprecedented administrative challenges during the pandemic to provide remote meal services, increase funding, enroll households for benefits virtually, and create services to reach people not being served in traditional institutional settings. USDA's response to COVID-19 has been driven by 5 new federal laws, which you can see on this simple timeline. These laws were enacted starting in March of 2020 to provide program flexibilities and additional funding to support sponsor organizations during COVID-19. FNS continued this funding in 2021 and most recently passed the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which was enacted in March of this year. So hopefully that provides a brief introduction to USDA's Food and Nutrition Service, our work, and some of the challenges, as well as USDA's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. What I'd like to do now is just introduce my fellow panelists who will follow me and provide additional information about these FNS programs and the work they do with New York State in the Northeast region. I'll start by quickly reintroducing myself. My name is Mary Jo McClarney, and I serve as a team lead in the School Nutrition Programs branch of the Food Nutrition Service in the Northeast Regional Office. Next, we'll hear from my colleague, Ashley Krebs, who's the team lead in the SNAP operations. Ashley will be followed by Patty Conley, who will speak about USDA food programs. After Patty, Matt Chakowski will speak about the child and adult care food program, as well as the child nutrition programs. Finally, Sibel Van Antwerp will speak about farm-to-school programming in the Northeast. I now turn the presentation over to my colleague, Ashley Krebs.
Thanks, Mary Jo. As Mary Jo mentioned, my name is Ashley Krebs, and I'm a team lead in the SNAP operations branch at the Northeast Regional Office. Today, I'll be talking about the SNAP program while highlighting a few SNAP flexibilities that came to be in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. To provide a quick overview, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, otherwise known as SNAP, provides nutrition benefits to supplement the food budget of families in need so they can purchase healthy food and move towards self-sufficiency. SNAP is a federally funded, means-tested entitlement program. In the state of New York, the New York Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance is a state agency that administers the SNAP program. For reference, in February 2021, New York SNAP benefits for the month totaled over $595,000 that went to over 2.7 million participants. Now, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, certain key flexibilities were developed. Today, I'll touch upon 5 in particular, including the SNAP benefit increase, our emergency allotments, pandemic EBT, or also known as PEBT, SNAP online purchasing, and some additional state flexibilities. Let's first discuss the SNAP benefit increase. The Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 raised maximum allotments and/or benefits to 115% of the June 2020 value of the Thrifty Food Plan. This resulted in a 15% benefit increase, or about $27 per month per person for most SNAP participants. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 then extends this increase to the SNAP maximum allotments through September 30th, 2021. An additional flexibility being utilized is emergency allotments. Currently, FNS is approving states to issue emergency supplements to SNAP households that normally receive less than the maximum benefit. USDA has granted waivers to states, including New York, allowing for the issuance of emergency allotments, also known as supplements, based on a public health emergency declaration by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Currently, eligible households receive a minimum of $95 per month in emergency allotments. Another flexibility you may be hearing about is pandemic EBT or PEBT. FNS is allowing states to provide benefits similar to SNAP to school children and children in child care. This includes children who normally receive free or reduced price school meals and children in child care who are members of a household that receives SNAP. Through PEBT, eligible children receive temporary emergency nutrition benefits loaded on EBT cards that are used to purchase food. PEBT benefits are currently available in any school year or covered summer period that follows a school year, in which there is a public health emergency declaration based on an outbreak of COVID-19. The state of New York currently has approved school year 2019-2020 and school year 2020-2021 PEBT plans. USDA is also making investments to expand SNAP online purchasing. FNS rapidly expanded SNAP online purchasing to support social distancing, bringing access to nearly 3/4 of states, covering 90% of SNAP households. New York participates in the online purchasing pilot and has a number of approved retailers in the state, including Aldi, Amazon, Price Chopper Supermarkets, ShopRite, and Walmart. Finally, there are many additional state flexibilities we could discuss, but I will highlight a few. The Continuing Appropriations Act of 2021 allows states to adopt certain options without FNS action, including extension of certification periods and adjustment of periodic reports, use of periodic reporting procedures to recertify households, and waiving initial and recertification interviews. Each adjustment option has specific time periods they are available for, and I will note that these specific adjustments referenced are available to states regardless of whether or not a public health emergency declaration or state emergency declaration are in place. These flexibilities assist states to reduce administrative burdens and increase access to participants. The state of New York has elected to make use of many of these flexibilities, amongst others. That concludes my segment about SNAP and the USDA FNS response during the COVID-19 pandemic. I encourage you to explore the USDA website for more details on the many SNAP flexibilities and options available to states. Please feel free to write any questions in the chat box, and we will work to respond to them at the end of the presentation. I'll now hand it off to the next panelist, my colleague, Patty Connolly.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello, everyone. My name is Patty Connolly, and I oversee the 4 USDA food programs. Today, I'll speak primarily about TFAP, the Emergency Food Assistance Program. USDA purchases fully domestic product from American farmers to support domestic nutrition programs and to support American farmers. USDA food programs are different in that, unlike other nutrition assistance programs where financial assistance is loaded onto an EBT card or schools are provided financial reimbursement for meals, the USDA food benefit comes in the form of actual food. While all FNS programs were part of the pandemic response, TFAP particularly was front and center. TFAP is the safety net program for federal food assistance. It is intended to address emergency food needs with minimal burden to demonstrate eligibility. During a disaster, TFAP is USDA's first program to be on site and feed people, as it is already set up for emergency feeding with networks in place and food at its sites. Pre-COVID, New York averaged between $36 and $40 million a year in TFAP food from USDA. In 2019, New York received an additional $59 million in trade mitigation foods, resulting in an unprecedented total of $89 million in food in New York in 2019. Unprecedented, that is, until 2020 and the pandemic hit. Trade mitigation continued for a second year, bringing in another $67 million in food to New York, but add the Family First Coronavirus Act and the CARES Act, and New York TFAP program was offered about $159 million in food in 2020. So far in 2021, New York has received over $54 million in food in TFAP, still above average. This includes annual funding, bonus offerings, and over $20 million from the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and the year is not over yet. As Mary Jo mentioned earlier, the agency responsible for administering TFAP in New York is the Office of General Services, or OGS. In addition to all the TFAP food coming in 2020, New York OGS immediately responded to the pandemic by requesting flexibilities in its TFAP operation. This included increasing the income eligibility requirement, waiving signature requirements, expanding drive-through distributions and TFAP sites, and OGS also requested that shipments already ordered and in the pipeline be expedited to help the immediate food demand of New York residents. As you all know, Westchester County was an initial COVID hotspot in the country, and New York OGS was the first state in the country to request and be approved for a disaster household distribution, or DHD, and a request and approval for New York City soon followed. A disaster household distribution, or DHD, gave food banks additional flexibility in distributing USDA foods to anyone impacted by the disaster in Westchester County and New York City, regardless of their income levels. DHDs are designed to be flexible and to have an extremely low bar for access. This makes it work well in the immediate aftermath of a disaster or an emergency, but it also presents program integrity challenges over the long term. So DHDs are only approved for the short-term time frame. Additionally, DHDs rely on USDA food inventories from programs like TFAP. Therefore, prolonged use of a DHD will strain those inventories, which can jeopardize the ongoing operation of the regular TFAP program. The Commodity Supplemental Food Program, or CSFP, is USDA's elderly feeding program and operates in the greater New York City area. The elderly were some of the most vulnerable population during COVID. CSFP is administered in New York by the Department of Health, and New York Department of Health also had an immediate pandemic response, requesting flexibilities in their CSFP operation to ease administrative burdens in getting food to its elderly population, like eliminating the signature requirements, allowing verbal attestation of eligibility, expanding the use of mobile distributions, exploring home delivery options, and shifting caseload to the hardest hit areas. So in summary, there was a large influx of USDA foods and funds into New York in response to COVID-19. And USDA worked with New York OGS and the New York Department of Health to respond swiftly to the needs of New York residents, implementing flexibilities to ease various administrative burdens while maintaining program integrity. Thank you. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague, Matt Jakowski.
Thank you, Patty. Folks, my name is Matt Chitkowski. I work with the Nero Community Nutrition Program branch in Boston. I'll be speaking with you today about three main child nutrition programs: the National School Lunch Program, which I'll refer to as School Lunch; the Summer Food Service Program, referred to as Summer for today's presentation; and the Child and Adult Care Food Program, which I'll call Child Care, again, just for today's purposes. To give you a brief introduction, School Lunch is a federally assisted meal program operating in public and nonprofit private schools, as well as residential childcare institutions. It provides nutritionally balanced, low-cost or no-cost lunches to children each school day. The New York City Board of Education serves upwards of 1 million meals a day to school children. Summer is federally funded, reimbursing providers who serve healthy meals to children and teens in low-income areas during the summer months when school is not in session. To give you an idea of the size of the summer program in New York, combined School Lunch and Summer in New York State receives over $1 billion of federal reimbursement and $40 million in state funding annually. And finally, Child Care's mission is to ensure that nutritious and safely prepared meals and snacks are available to children and adults in daycare settings. These include adult daycare centers, after-school programs, family daycare homes, and homeless shelters. To give you an idea of the size of the program, again, in New York, there are 1,400 sponsoring organizations representing 14,000 licensed or registered center-based or family daycare sites participating, serving approximately 370,000 children and adults each day. The current funding level is $236 million for childcare in New York State. Now, to address FNS's response to the pandemic, New York State declared a state of emergency on March 7th, 2020, and it quickly became an epicenter of the national outbreak. As Patty indicated, Westchester County was the initial focus, with the highest concentration of positive cases found in the New York City area. In the past, during natural disasters, Our agency's response has been to set up large feeding sites under tents in stadiums. This, as you know, has been a very different situation with the pandemic, and the government had to get creative. The summer program traditionally operates during summer months of June, July, and August. As a result of COVID, in March 2020, many flexibilities and national waivers transitioned the summer program to be operated by the majority of school food authorities to meet the need of feeding children in a non-congregate food setting during the unanticipated school closures, and continued throughout the summer months and into the next school year. Our response as an agency has included nationwide waivers for the child nutrition program requirements to allow sponsors to offer school lunch, summer program, and seamless summer option during this regular school year, to waive area eligibility requirements for the summer program and serve free meals to children, provide parent and guardian meal pickup, waive meal service times, which was required because of preparation and practicality factors, allow meal pattern flexibilities. The availability of food items was sometimes an issue. Allow non-congregate feeding programs, and establish the emergency operational cost reimbursement program to cover financial losses for meal providers, which I will describe in more detail a bit later in this presentation. School food nutrition staff have been on the front lines during this pandemic. Meeting the nutritional needs of the children has and is taking a tremendous amount of creativity and resources to adapt to the challenges experienced by schools and in communities during this pandemic. During COVID in childcare, in April 2020, the New York City Board of Health required New York City childcare centers and school-based childcare programs to close, with the exception for those providing care to essential workers. Similarly to schools, to support access to nutritious meals during COVID-19 public health crises, our agency released a series of nationwide waivers, including allowing CACFP participating programs to continue providing meals to children as well as adults during unexpected daycare closures, allowing meals to be served in non-congregate settings, which support social distancing measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19, and allowing meals to be picked up from sites and/or delivered to program participants' homes, allowing multiple days worth of meals and snacks to be provided at one time, something we call bulk distribution and was more practical in rural areas. While a number of daycare programs closed, others experienced major decreases in participation as a result of the pandemic. Finally, as I mentioned previously, I'd like to speak about the Emergency Operational Cost Reimbursement Program, a new FNS program that has been created to fund and cover financial losses of school districts and childcare meal providers during the start of the pandemic in March 2020 through June 2020. The program will reimburse both school food authorities and child and adult care center sponsors that experienced financial losses during the past year. The calculation determining the amount of federal funding is calculated by a formula designed to identify those institutions who lost reimbursement during a specific period of time. These funds will be distributed to the various eligible institutions by the state agencies over the coming summer months. I realize this is a lot of information in a short period of time. We have a large agency with many programs. Again, I remind you to please use the chat function to submit any questions or clarifications that you might like for us to address during the Q&A. And now I'd like to turn it over to Sabelle.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everyone. And again, my name is Sabelle Van Antwerp. I am the Northeast Farm to School Regional Lead. And as Regional Lead, I serve as the main point of contact for all organizations awarded a Farm to School grant in the Northeast, including New York and the Virgin Islands. So to provide a quick overview, on an annual basis, USDA awards competitive farm to school grants that support planning, developing, and implementing farm-to-school programs. USDA's farm-to-school grants are an important way to help state, regional, and local organizations as they initiate, expand, and institutionalize farm-to-school efforts. More broadly, USDA is committed to incorporating local and regional foods throughout its nutrition assistance programs, providing high-quality, nutritious foods to program participants, and increasing economic opportunities for U.S. food producers. So to achieve this goal, USDA encourages program participation across all types of agricultural producers and all types of program operators. And the USDA Farm to School Grant Program is one way that schools, state agencies, Indian tribal organizations, producers, and nonprofit organizations are working together to incorporate local and regional foods. In the 2020 to 2021 school year, the Farm to School Grant Program supported 159 grants nationwide, serving 7,610 schools and more than 2.5 million students. Over 57% of the children served in participating schools were eligible for free and reduced price meals. In New York, USDA currently has 17 active grantees throughout the state. Since the grant program began in 2013, 40 grants have been awarded in New York, and this represents over $2.5 million in funding. So simply put, Farm to School refers to efforts that bring locally or regionally produced foods into schools, including sourcing local foods for school meal programs, providing hands-on learning activities such as school gardening, farm visits, and culinary classes, and integrating food-related education into the regular standards-based classroom curriculum. USDA considers farm to school to be inclusive of many types of producers, such as farmers, ranchers, and fishers, as well as many types of food businesses, including food processors, manufacturers, distributors, and other value-added operations. USDA encourages efforts to increase locally produced foods across all child nutrition programs, including those presented by my colleagues, such as the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, Summer Food Service Program, Child and Adult Care Food Program, and Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. Despite the challenges COVID-19 has presented, Farm to School grantees have navigated this new landscape and continued to support local food systems in innovative ways. So in New York specifically, grantees have adopted strategies including generating educational materials to encourage cooking at home, as well as distributing local produce at school meal sites, and in some areas, even with corresponding bilingual Harvest of the Month materials for families. Organizations have leveraged social media and their web pages to promote Harvest of the Month programs as well. Many New York grantees have incorporated videography in their programming, making educational videos that show foods moving through the local supply chain, from being fresh on the farm to being prepared in the kitchen to entering the school cafeteria for students to enjoy. These videos have been useful to food service staff, students, teachers, and parents in promoting the ease of using fresh local products. For other grantees, thinking outside the box has meant designing virtual field trips, take-home planting kits, in-classroom aero gardens, and more. These efforts have made it possible for students to receive the full benefit of the program while also maintaining a safe environment for all. Ultimately, these are just a few quick examples from the state of New York to demonstrate how USDA Farm to School grantees have found innovative ways to continue designing and implementing educational and experiential learning tactics, sourcing local foods, and embedding farm to school principles within policies and systems. Despite the obstacles these organizations faced, these activities continue to provide a holistic approach that benefits entire communities, from the youngest eaters in daycare to senior citizens participating in community meal programs. Looking ahead, USDA will award up to $10 million in competitive grants to eligible entities through the Farm to School Grant Program in this fiscal year 2021. These awards will be announced this month. And in addition to another great year ahead for the Farm to School Grant Program, the Office of Community Food Systems plans to share the results of the 2019 Farm to School Census in the coming months. The Farm to School Census collects information on the scope of farm to school activity, the amount spent by schools on local food products, the types of products bought by schools for their nutrition programs, and other relevant information from school food authorities across the country. So I'll end today by encouraging everyone to stay tuned for the release of the results of this census and to look for the next Farm to School Grant for request for applications, or RFA, as well, which will come out in October. And with that, we will transition into the final portion of our session, which is a question and answer period. Thank you so much for listening, and I will now turn it back over to our facilitator, Sherry.
Thank you, Cybele, and thank you to each of you for those very efficient and succinct presentations. The overview of the services provided through your regional office and the response to COVID is very enlightening and I think very helpful for all of us here in today's session. So I'd like to invite our audience to submit questions in the comments tab for any of our panelists. There are a couple of questions that I think have been generated just by some of the presentations you've made already, and I'd love to pose some of those to you today. So first, I was wondering if you could tell us how any of us participating today may find more information about participating in these programs, and I'll let any of our panelists kick us off.
Hi, Sherry. This is Mira Jo. I can take that question. So the easiest way, if you want to find general information, you should go to the USDA website and just type in usda.fns.gov, and that will take you to our general web page. If you're looking for specific information, I recommend that you go to the local agency. So as an example, if you wanted information on the school lunch program in your community, the best place would be to reach out to your school nutrition program at your local education agency. And if you want information about programs that are being offered, particularly in New York, the best place to go is to reach out to that agency. So as an example, the summer food service program will be opening and kicking off soon. New York State Ed does a wonderful job of promoting that program and providing information on their website of locations and ways to access those programs. So all of those ways you can find out additional information.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Especially, I think ramping up for summer and for some of the school year programs. That's very helpful. Do any of the other panelists have anything to add to that?
I would just mention that on the USDA website, there is also state-specific pages related to COVID-19 waivers and flexibilities, at least specific to SNAP, and it does include a variety of the other program flexibilities. And so if that is of interest to any participants, they can look by state and find out more specific details related to the COVID-19 response.
Thank you very much. I know we have relied on that waiver information a lot to make sure that we're updated on what the procedures and policies are. Thank you. Actually, Ashley, I have a question for you that perhaps you could address regarding SNAP. Can you talk a little bit about what USDA is doing to promote social distancing in SNAP, which really is a high concern for a lot of vulnerable populations in our state and across the country?
Yeah, thanks. So FNS, the Food and Nutrition Service, has allowed a number of SNAP flexibilities, specifically around social distancing. Some of those SNAP flexibilities look to reduce the need for face-to-face contact. So, for example, USDA has allowed the option to waive face-to-face interviews, utilize telephonic signature, and suspend face-to-face QC interviews, just to name a few, in an effort to promote social distancing within the SNAP program.
Very good. And can you give us a sense of how long those types of flexibilities are in place for?
So there is state discretion. And so a number of those are options that the state would elect to use. We typically were looking through the initial period to approve on a monthly or bi-monthly basis for those flexibilities. So for a number of states, they've been being utilized for the better part of the year and over. And then depending on the state, some choose to transition off. So I would say that a lot of states have flexibility depending on the waiver type, but that a lot have utilized them for the better part of the pandemic.
Very good. Thank you for that. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about child nutrition programs and actually this upcoming school year. You know, many school districts are thick in the middle of planning for how their schools will operate in 21-22, and our state is just now releasing guidance on what, some of the COVID specific precautions will be. And I was wondering if any of you, and I wonder, Mary Jo, if you may kick us off, or another child nutrition panelist, to talk about what USDA has planned for this upcoming school year.
Sure, Sherry. So one of the things that USDA will be doing this year is allowing school nutrition programs to run the seamless summer option throughout the school year. And what that means is that schools that elect to participate in that option will be able to provide free meals for all students, regardless of their eligibility. And so that's the way that USDA is meeting the challenges of the continued needs as a result of COVID-19. Schools will also have the option to run traditional national school lunch and school breakfast programs, but with using the seamless summer option, all meals provided to children will be of no charge. So that's probably the biggest change that's going forward. USDA is going to continue to work with schools and states on needed flexibilities as they arise. So we anticipate more guidance to come as well. And USDA has been extremely responsive over the course of the year, issuing state and nationwide waivers to allow state flexibilities to adapt to all of the changes and challenges of COVID-19.
And Mary Jo, I'd just like to add to that, because USDA has been proactive in regards to planning for the fall. And one of the things they've acknowledged is that the cost of producing meals during this period of time has escalated. There are different expenses, some of which is you actually have paper products that you're preparing meals to send out to people's homes. So during this school year coming, the actual rate of reimbursement is going to be the higher summer rural rate for the school year. And that should alleviate some of the cost issues. And Mary Jo had alluded to the waivers that will be in place. There's many of the same waivers that we've had in place over the course of the year. Again, we're anticipating the unknown of what's happening in the fall, but so we want to have things in place, things like non-congregate meals, mealtime flexibilities, parent guardian pickup, offer versus serve flexibilities. All of those will be in place for the fall. In addition, within the child and adult care food program, after school meals and snacks will be included, area flexibility for those, as well as child care's daycare home tiering. Area eligibility flexibilities will apply for those as well.
Very good. That's very helpful, because the planning, not only for summer, Matt, as you know, started way back in the spring, but, full school year planning is largely underway right now. And I know that on behalf of an anti-hunger organization that works with schools to maximize programs, that type of guidance will really make a big difference in the ability to serve children, regardless of where they are. I wanted to go back to an idea that Patty had discussed earlier in the presentation, and this was about the disaster household distribution, or DHDs. And you talked about that, sort of at that local level, and sort of the advantages and disadvantages of that type of declaration. And I was wondering if you could talk about why a disaster household distribution was not approved for New York as a statewide.
Sure. Well, first, the state has to request a disaster household distribution, a DHD. And New York State did not request a statewide DHG. I believe they understand FNS only approves DHGs under certain circumstances. So, for instance, maybe the commercial food distribution channels may have been disrupted. So even those with higher income levels have challenges accessing nutritious food. Also, I suspect New York felt like the emergency network already in place was meeting the demand in those other areas, and they had to consider their USDA food, their TFAP inventory levels, and prolonged use of a DHG constrain those inventories. So DHGs are not really, they're not about eliminating income eligibility requirements in order to ease distribution processes and speed up lines. It's still important to the integrity of the program that those who are most in need receive TFAP food. So DHGs were approved for states and areas within states that demonstrated that the typical TFAP network was incapable of meeting that demand of those impacted by the disaster.
Right. Okay. Understood. And I know that that's a question that a lot of advocates had early on. And I think understanding that is very helpful. Thank you.
I think just, initially everybody's like, just disaster household distribution, just get all the food out there. But, we had to be methodical about it and understand what that can lead to. The demand was there. All the food wasn't immediately there. OGS did expedite shipments to get food there more quickly, but they had to consider everybody in the state and not just, the programs and the inventories throughout the state and not just in that New York City and Westchester.
Right. Right. And the disruption, felt, across the state, was intense, but it was varied. And so I think that methodical approach, really is beneficial. Thank you for that explanation. I know we're coming up on the time that we'll wrap up this session, but I had one other question here, Cybele, that maybe I could come back to you around the Farm to School grant program, which has been enormously successful in New York State with a lot of committed partners working on this. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, a little bit more about COVID-19 flexibilities offered to organizations who are in this grant program.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. That's probably a good question to end on because it is a quicker one. And that's just because the main flexibility that's been offered is that many grantees are now allowed to request an extension to their grant for up to 1 year. It's usually 6 months. And so the idea is that while within some of the project revisions that have been made that I did kind of touch on briefly, some of the different virtual approaches and some of the kind of social media approaches to programming that have been adopted, there are certain activities that really work well at school in person. And so there's just that idea that if grantees need a little bit more time, we are allowing for those requests to come through.
Good. Well, that is a positive note to end on.
Yes.
And I appreciate that very much. I want to thank each of you for the time and effort that you put into bringing your information here to us in New York today. Not only to our audience at the moment, but to those who will watch this on replay and learn more about the services and the programs that USDA operates and how that can benefit all of us in New York. And I know I speak on behalf of a lot of people when I say how grateful we are for the responsiveness and the focus and the strategy of your agency and the effort that's been put forward to help all of us in New York operate our programs to the maximum benefit of New Yorkers in need. So Mary Jo, Cybele, Matt, Patty, and Ashley, thank you so much for your time today. And I wish you well in your future work. And I also want to thank everyone for joining us today. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sherry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.